Hi, I'm Mike. As Alex said, I had worked at Trains Magazine for better than 30 years as the advertising guy. Um, it was interesting. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and I had an opportunity to work at Trains. I was in sales. I was between jobs, and I thought, okay, well, sure, I'll do that for a couple of years, figuring 2, 3, 4 years. I was there for 30. So, but yeah, people ask me, well, you were taking pictures for the magazine. I said, no. That was Alex Mays's job. I mean, I was there for the business end, but I have been a railroad photographer since 1972. That's when I shot my first railroad picture. And so it dawned on me last year. I did the math. 50 years. That's kind of like a milestone. And to me, and I thought, I might want to commemorate this with a program. So for our Wisconsin chapter, I put a program together. I've shown it to a couple other chapters as well. And once again, I really do appreciate the invite, Alex. If anybody else is of similar age and has similar tenure, and I know Alex does, of shooting trains, I know Bill Kalkman does, and I'm pretty sure several of you do. You have to reconsider that, because this became a much larger project than I ever anticipated. 50 years. It's mind-bogglingly stupid to do all that, but that's what I tried to distill down to a short little presentation for you tonight. And we'll get started here to see how this thing works. Yeah, you should see my screen. Alex, I still see your computer. Can you give me a heads up if you see my screen? Okay. Just give me a thumbs up there, Alex. Just lift. Yeah. Just wave at me or something. Bill, can you see? Okay, good. Thanks. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that.
We can see it.
Okay, good. 50 years of railroad photography. So this is a brief look at a lifetime of railroad scenes. When I started this hobby, it was 1972. And you know what? This is what I looked like back then. I found this recently. This is actually my class picture from 1972 of all things. And that's kind of an approximation of what I looked like when I started this. And here it is 50 years later, and I look like this. So our program here today will be set up in chapters. We're going to pop around the United States geographically. It's not chronological, but we'll start off at the beginning, though, however, on Long Island. Oh, and the first thing I have to say is the thing I miss most about Long Island, in addition, of course, to the beaches and my beloved Long Island Railroad, is pizza. We just cannot get good pizza here in Wisconsin. The cheese is good, but the crust is terrible. The sauce, okay. Pepperoni is usually okay too, but the crust is just awful. And for some godforsaken reason, they insist on cutting the pizza into squares. And to me, that's just wrong. But anyway, that's just me. This is the first railroad picture I ever took. It's in my hometown of Port Jefferson. Long Island Railroad used push-pull equipment in the 1970s with usually a PA or an FA. Talking about Doyle McCormick made me think of PAs, but this is an FA with traction motors all taken out, but the original prime mover is in it to generate HEP for the formerly electric MU cars that were turned into these trailers. And there's a C420 on the back end pushing it out of the yard. So this was just sort of a normal day at the end of the line there in Port Jefferson. I got to know some crew. I went on some rides. These are not the best of pictures because I got to tell you, I took them with an Instamatic back then. That's all I had. But with scanning technology, you can't really do too much to make them better, but I tried. This is at Huntington, at the culmination of that shuttle train's trip, changing out some equipment that day. That's why there's two sets of diesel-powered trains there. Here's another shot in Port Jefferson. I had upgraded to a 35 millimeter camera. At this point, it's not an SLR, but at least the format of the film was correct. And this was probably shot, this may have been shot on color negative film. I don't really remember, but a C420 and a couple of coaches tied up in the yard. One time they had an RS1 sitting there as well. Kind of interesting. This is a shot taken out of the back window of our family car. We were leaving Long Island, going on a vacation. We were going upstate, well, to the southern tier of New York on a family vacation, and I happened to get this ambient shot hanging out the window. As you can see, we were barreling down at all speed, but kind of neat. The 200, that locomotive there, is actually still working today. It's working on the Western New York and Pennsylvania. A couple more FAs sitting in the yard at Port Jeff. A couple C420s. This was back when the cars were heated by steam. There was as you see, there was a little water tap that kept the water tanks filled up, and they ran steam through them the entire weekend when they were tied up. And here's a road freight about ready to leave as soon as the passenger train gets out of the way. More often than not, though, they used RS3s like this. In 1976, that started the end of the Alco era on Long Island with the addition of GP38-2s. And they look good when they're clean. But we had some time. We're just going to run down the road here a little bit. Hey, this engineer is George Thorne, one of the higher seniority guys on the railroad. I remember him from back in the day. A train with P-54 ping pong cars. And the local freight actually had some customers not too far from my house. This was a facility that received aggregates, I guess, for construction projects, and they also shipped out sand. So they were switching cars around that day. The guy in the orange hat is a guy named Barry Waldbaum. He was the track walker for the Long Island Railroad. He couldn't walk the track if there was a train on it. Basically an inspector. And here's another day moving some cars in and out of the facility there. This track to the left is the lead that went into that facility, and of course that disappeared many years ago. And a couple of years ago, I went back, and that's the remnants of the track that's going into the facility. You'll see it down there at the bottom.
So, Mike, is the Port Jefferson branch still diesel then?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Bill. So it's electrified from Hicksville, which is basically where the branch ends or starts, to Huntington, and then diesel powered all the way to Port Jeff. This is the defunct station, now defunct, long gone station of Setauket, with a midday train coming in into town there. And
are those the horns on the side of the locomotive?
Yes.
And why'd they put them like?
Where else would you put them?
On top?
I don't think they had the clearance. Is that an old Buick in the parking lot there? I see there's a Gremlin and an old school phone booth.
Thunderbird too.
Mm-hmm. Huntington. Road freight, local freight working around Huntington as well. You see a third rail there for the electric operation. This is Jamaica, a train coming into Jamaica Station, westbound, probably from Oyster Bay. For a time, the Long Island leased some GP 7s, I think they were, from the Bangor and Aroostook. This is the train that went from Ronkonkoma to Greenport every day. That's Bob Emery on the gangway there, giving the engineer hand sign for coupling into it's one car, which this is where they were tied up for a couple of hours before they went back to Ronkonkoma. This is the very tip of the east end, the North Fork of the east end of Long Island. And this is just back in November with their new DE 30s, custom built locomotives for the Long Island. And you'll notice on this one, the person who asked the question about the horn, that's the horn right above the windshield there. So it's below the roof line because of close clearances, very close clearances there. This is at Patchogue one day. That fellow taking the picture off to the right-hand edge there, that's Bob Emery again and his son. We went out there one Friday afternoon to watch the parade of first-class trains going to Montauk. So with the C420 and a GP9 leased from Precision National. That first car, it's hard to tell, but it is a former Phoebe Snow car. Came from the area of Lackawanna. This is West Hampton. I love the architecture of the station there. Another midday train a few years later that I shot with color film, being shoved by two locomotives, a Bangor and Aroostook and a C420. This is at Sayville just a couple of years ago. And I specifically went to Sayville. I was on Long Island on a business trip visiting a couple of customers. And I wanted to go to Sayville because I thought for sure there had to be a barber of Sayville. Barber of Seville. I went to the barber in Sayville and I actually did get my haircut at the Iron and Tread barber shop there. So there I looked pretty slick. And here's a shot of an electric train at Central Islip, probably on that same trip. So I also spent a long time at the west end of Long Island, at Long Island City. The best place in the world for me, for a kid of like 13 at the time, was maybe I was 15. Hunters Point Avenue Station. You could go there, spend the afternoon watching all the Amtraks and New Jersey Transit go into the tube to get into New York City Penn Station. It said 1972 or 3 there. It was still a little bit of a rainbow of colors. So there's an unrepainted UP car in this train, but it was kind of fun and nobody ever bothered you. Number 7 train up above, back in the graffiti days of New York City Transit. And more than likely it's a New Jersey Transit Penn Central commuter train. Another one. Long Island Railroad M1s going into New York City. And a few years later, with some M7s. An Amtrak with their modern power of the time, HHP. Is that HHP 8? I guess it was, right? They do. It's not the laissez-faire attitude that used to be when I was a kid. On this particular day, it was probably around 2003, 2004. I happened to be standing on the platform, actually waiting for my train. I got there really early, but I was taking some pictures. And the next thing I know, several MTA cops come up and ask me what I was doing. They asked for my driver's license. They didn't know how to read it because I was from Wisconsin. It was kind of funny, humorous, but whatever. But this was a few years earlier with some equipment going into Long Island City. And MU going into Long Island City, or probably just the Hunters Point Avenue depot here. They use these double-decker diesel haul equipment. So they used to have a wash rack there at Hunters Point Avenue. That's my friend Andy standing on the platform. We went down there one day, 1974 or so. Basically, we had just gotten our driver's licenses and we went in and watched what was happening. It was kind of fun. Oh, there's that wash rack. You'll see it in the far left edge of the picture here. And a few years ago, well, this is probably going on 20 years ago now. A couple trains just sitting in Hunters Point Avenue, about ready to leave to go east. And then Long Island kept all of its passenger equipment at the Long Island City Passenger Yard, which you could basically just walk right up to. And I did. And nobody said anything. Of course, I wasn't doing anything stupid. I wasn't on the tracks or anything. But here's a train coming in to sit at the yard for a little while before it went out on an afternoon rush hour train. That bridge up on top there, that made a great vantage point as well, as this shot here is. That's the Empire State Building in the background. And you see in the yard, there's two trains that have their power on for their trip to the eastern end of Long Island already. One on the left and one on the right. And when I got down here, another unit had showed up. So it was a veritable parade. It was very tightly choreographed. These engines would go back and forth to Jamaica. They'd run on the Montauk branch, light engines, back and forth from the Long Island City Passenger Yard. So I happen to know the engineer on this train that was going to go out to Port Jeff with the 201 leading. And you can see this is some more engines had showed up. This is the Montauk cutoff. The Montauk branch, lower Montauk branch here in the foreground on the tracks that I am standing on, with the train going probably from Fresh Pond, going to Yard A in Long Island City over the now abandoned Montauk cutoff. They had lots of customers in Queens, including this bakery in Corona. It was an A&P bakery. So they did all the baking for all the A&P stores in the New York metropolitan area there. So they got loads of flour and sugar and, cherry filling and stuff in. And they shipped out their bakery goods by truck. So we befriended the people working the bakery, and they took a couple of dollars in tip from us and gave us a big seconds, some pies that were not good for sale. Here we are on an maybe an RS1, or it's probably might be a switcher at Long Island City Yard A. We went for a little ride. We went past Sunnyside Yard. And wouldn't you know, a bunch of GG1s there. That was kind of fun. But one day we knew the engineer here too. We rode with him from Yard A over the cutoff. We're on the Montauk cutoff right now, and you see that's the main line of Amtrak and so forth down below. And we're riding this. We're going to get on the Montauk branch, go east, and get off the Montauk branch at Fresh Pond, where interchange was made with Penn Central. I didn't know how to hold the camera correctly at this point. So there you go. So we had family in Philadelphia. So we started we were visiting them since childhood, but I brought my camera with me for the first time in 1972. And my aunt lived on Lansdowne Avenue. So we walked down to the Red Arrow line there. Got this picture of an inbound Sharon Hill train with a PCC. Is that a PCC? Yeah, I think it is. And that's a Brill liner, I believe, heading out to Media. She lived also close to the Lansdowne, Pennsylvania Railroad station. Still using Penn Central cars, even though SEPTA had formed at that point. One morning, I just watched the MP54s going in. That was fun. They're old rickety things, but the commuters loved them. Well, they had no choice, really. But after the Center City commuter tunnel project got rid of Reading Terminal and linked the Reading side to the Pensy side, equipment from the Reading side started running through to on the Pensy side. So here's ex-Reading blue liners passing the Lansdowne station with the characteristic Pennsylvania keystone in the sign. And we had another aunt who lived in aunt and uncle lived in Wynwood in the building, the apartment building that you see in the background there. So I just wander over to the Wynwood station and see some trains. There's an ore train back when they used to run freight on the main line with a couple GB30s, a delightful sight. And it was a delightful sight to see the passenger trains as well.
Mike, is this anywhere near Germantown, the Germantown section of Philadelphia?
No, we're in Montgomery County.
Oh, yeah, I lived
So-
there too for a little while. That's why I was asking. Okay.
Yeah, we're a little out of the city proper. On our way to Ardmore and Paoli. So this is the National Limited. And a couple of years later, with some Keystone Service train going by around the fall. So this is pretty much directly across from my aunt and uncle's house apartment. Remember, we finished up Thanksgiving dinner. And then I said, hey, can I go for a walk? Walked across the street. There's a car dealership. I walked through their cars, climbed up the embankment, and I heard a train coming and a couple GB35s with a train going up the hill, which was delightful. Of course, no more. This is Ardmore Station, just a little bit west of there. One morning went out there and wanted to see some freight trains, and well, we saw a light engine. That was kind of cool. But then it went back the other way a little while later. Must have had to pick up these E44s in its train out in Paoli. But it wasn't a train, it was just engines. So, oh well, at least I saw E44s in action at one point. And then there's that SEPTA train that's just leaving there as well to go into town. A few years later at Paoli with the Broadway Limited coming in eastbound. And here we are at Exton with Keystone Service. And a Pennsylvanian when it was only 3 cars. Off in the background is the Whitford Bridge. Here it is closer. Broadway Limited going underneath. That track above was still in service at the time. I didn't manage to get very many pictures. The lighting was always terrible when I was there, but I got a sunset shot of an eastbound Conrail. And another time from a slightly different, the other side of the track's vantage point, trespassing where I shouldn't have been, but nobody cared. And of course, they still ran cabooses then. So all that's gone now. And I spent a little time in Parksburg. And I know somebody's going to know which 2 lines converge here, the low grade line, right, and the line to Harrisburg. But Conrail ran a fair amount of freight through there before it was all shifted over to the Reading. Off in the distance, you see a headlight, and that is this train coming in, making its station stop at Parksburg. SD40s ruled the day on Conrail. We got tired of them, but boy, do I miss them now. And then eventually, well, they took these tracks out of service. So there's the Broadway Limited one day going past the out of service track. So in 1974, I think it was 1974, my aunt and I, we went on a little train watching expedition. She didn't have a car, so we had to ride the train. We rode SEPTA from her place in Lansdowne into 30th Street and then out here to Fulcroft, got off the train and watched some Amtraks go by, like this one, a Metroliner going by at all speed. And it was just GG1 after GG1 after GG1 with their wonderful horns. I know you guys miss them too. And a Metroliner. The lady with the red coat that's my aunt. Okay. The whoosh that the train made when it went through, I'm kind of surprised it didn't knock over my aunt. But this is the Montrealer, or it might have been called the Washingtonian at that point. And the reason I remember that is because the rear cars were CN cars with an inbound SEPTA on the far track. And yet another one. And a few years later, this is, what was running. I lived in Philadelphia for a few years in the early mid 80s, mid to late 80s. And so AEM 7s were all over the place. Of course, we got tired of them too. Went back a couple of years ago, and the Siemens engines were ruling the day then. It was kind of fun. This was one of my favorite spots to hang out. This was the passenger station at Prospect Park. Conrail was running lots of freight on the Northeast Corridor. So we would see Conrail. You never know what you would see, but you usually see a bunch of SEPTAs, a bunch of Amtraks, and at least a Conrail for any given, few hours that you stayed there. At one point, they put up a fence in between the tracks to cut down on trespassers. It's still a problem. But we would just sit in the parking lot here and watch the trains go by, whooshing by at all speed. Nothing better than sitting in the car with a cheesesteak watching trains. And this was right near the end of the AEM 7 days. The distant headlight of a SEPTA way off in the background, and it looks like there is an Amtrak receding off in the distance as well. Acela coming at us quite quickly.
Did Conrail have to pay Amtrak to run freight on the Northeast Corridor?
I believe so. I don't know what their arrangement was, but yeah, they were a tenant on the railroad. Of course, I'm not sure what the entire history, but I believe that was how it worked. This is Ridley Park, another station's couple west or south or whatever. This is one of the Florida trains coming in the morning. And here again is another Conrail train. Now, after the big wreck at Chase, it wasn't much longer after that when a lot of this freight was taken off and rerouted on the parallel CSX Philadelphia sub.
Speaking of overhead clearance, you want to definitely have clearance when you got 11,000 volts over your head, right?
Yeah, you do. And back then they were still using cabooses. So that was fun. One morning I went down to Ridley Park, and I shot a series of images of a train kicking up some fresh snow. And this is my one and only Trains magazine cover shot. Another picture of this sequence actually was an inset on the June 1991 cover of Trains magazine. My claim to fame. This Marcus Hook, I believe some kind of refinery or something in the background there. The industry just was really kind of awesome with a E60 pulling a Florida train up. And, of course, I managed to get down to Perryville and places like that. And it's still one of my favorite places to go. So this is a shot I took back in November. So really not all that long ago. Crossing the bridge there into Havre de Grace. So, chapter 4, Storuca Viaduct and the D&H. So earlier on, I showed you a picture of a train sitting at Port Jefferson Station. We were on our way to a vacation. Well, this is where I ended up. This is my first shot of a train on the Storuca Viaduct. Not a necessarily good one, but, I was excited to see it. And a little while after that, a D&H train went underneath. So I lived in upstate in the Hudson Valley for a short time, 83, 84. So I did a little bit working on the taking pictures of D&H. C420 was leading here, and I liked C420s, even though this one was a short hood, a low short hood. I liked it okay. Whoops, some helpers. I think sitting at Nineveh, perhaps. Another train. It was raining pretty hard by now. Black and white film is good for that. And I guess actually this is Nineveh. They were doing all kinds of stuff here. There was like a three-way meet. Trains were going back and forth, and light engines and so forth. And when I showed this this presentation to the Wisconsin chapter, my home chapter, a couple months ago, one of our members, Gordy Smith, was a dispatcher he worked for the D&H basically for 50 years before he retired. He knew right away the name of the conductor at left. He probably told us the name of the conductor, but he referred to him by his nickname, which was just Pipe, because he always smoked a pipe. Kind of a neat ambience there. And eventually the train that was on the left moved, and these are helpers or something. I'm not really sure. I don't remember. I didn't take very good notes back then. So back in 1985, D&H was enlarging the bore at Belden Hill Tunnel. And so they did a lot of rerouting of trains off the old Erie and back into their own railroad here at Lanesboro. So here's some engines going under the Straka Viaduct. Gordy said he didn't realize, he remembered vividly with all these reroutes, but he didn't realize the D&H had actually put a station sign up at Lanesboro underneath the viaduct. So we managed to get a few shots. They were running lots of trains then. Made a couple of visits up there. This is on the Erie with an old coaling tower. A train coming up off the connection. And by then the D&H was in the Guilford family, so it wasn't always just D&H power, as you can see. And of course, while you're at Straka Viaduct, you have to shoot the Conrail stuff up there as well. This particular shot was interesting. I remember vividly two other rail fans standing there. We exchanged pleasantries, but we didn't introduce ourselves or anything because, rail fans typically antisocial. And I recall one of them might have had a ladder or a step ladder with them to get a little bit more elevation. But got a really nice shot of this Conrail mail train. Well, fast forward to, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, there was an article on trains.com written by Scott Lotus of the Center for Railroad Photography and Art. And he had delved into the collection of Victor Hand. And Victor Hand was known for taking a lot of steam photos back in the day, but he also kept shooting diesels. And he was well traveled, and the center ended up with his collection. There was a shot precisely like this one. I mean, it was just, you could tell he was one of the guys that was standing next to me. So I actually stood in the shadow of Victor Hand when he took his picture. This was my picture, and the other person was Don Phillips. So it was interesting. And another shot on the viaduct. Chapter 5 is looking at Connecticut and the State Line Tunnel area. Some washboard MUs at Bridgeport. Bridgeport was an easy boat ride. The Bridgeport and Port Jefferson Ferry Steamship Company went back and forth a couple times a day. So it was easy for a young rail fan to do some interstate rail fanning by just getting on the ferry and just hanging out at Bridgeport for a day. More washboards. Amtrak Turboliner went through. That was kind of neat. So a few years later, this was at Stanford. with an Amtrak heading up to Boston. And this was just this past November at one of the suburban stations there on Metro North with a Amtrak train blowing through. But back in 1980, though, we took some shots. This is East Norwalk, South, one of the Norwalks, and spent a little time in New Haven watching the crew change, the engine change, and then wandering around their engine facility. And again, nobody cared. Look at this variety of equipment. You got a Roger Williams RDC at left, some RS3s, an SPV 2000, GP9, couple more RDCs, and off on the right, this Bombardier LRC, all just sitting there. It was just crazy. There's a shot of that LRC. Wasn't in service very long, as I recall. It didn't appear to be in service that day, but it looked like it was serviceable.
That was, I believe, a demonstrator for Amtrak, and they decided not to.
Roger. Oh, Roger. By the way, here's Roger. And then there were all these E's in the back 40 just waiting for the torch, and wandered around there. And again, nobody said anything to me, but got some great shots. Some SDP 40Fs, are they? Bud cars in regular service. This had to have been 1980 or so. Yes, a couple years later, this is Danbury, which was a local base for Conrail at the time. On a weekend, nothing was happening, so the engines were just sitting there, and so were Metro North's FL9s. This SPV 2000 was running back and forth down to the where did it go? Stanford? I forget exactly where. I'd have to look at the map. I apologize. And for a short time, I lived in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley, and I got back into the railroad photography thing again. I was away for it for maybe a year or so. But the vistas up there, they said, well, Yuhas, you got to get yourself a new camera. So I did. And FL9 on its way into, I think we're at Rhinecliff, I think. I might be wrong on that. The train coming into Selkirk with, again, the ubiquitous ST40-2. This particular Conrail train got stopped by the cops. Somebody wasn't paying attention. They thought they could beat the train with their car. They didn't. So the cops came out and they were doing their paperwork at this point. Train coming out of the east portal of Huzek Tunnel. And this is the State Line Tunnel, train going into it. The SD50s were fairly new at the time. They were big. And they were relatively clean. This Boston and Albany was a haven for GE power. Coming out of the State Line tunnel, back when it was 2 tracks. That's been rationalized down to 1. I'm standing on the tunnel portal looking at this eastbound train.
Are those dots, or look like kind of like dots on the tunnel face? Are those reinforcement bars of some kind?
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. Up there?
Back up there. Yeah, right there. All those.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're little steel plates that there was some kind of bolting arrangement to keep this. They must have drilled and screwed and used this to keep the portal from caving in.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yeah.
Good idea.
Called roof bolts. They're called roof bolts.
All right. Thank you for that.
Okay.
And then I moved to the Philadelphia area, again. So I spent some time on the middle division. This one's Rockville Bridge. I took this one day last November, and I was staying at the Bridgeview bed and breakfast, and I put the drone up and took this one picture of the two trains, one with the freshly rebuilt DC to AC conversion, and another with the Central Georgia Heritage Unit. I thought, okay, I can go home now. I did that. But back in the 80s, I used to spend a fair amount of time out there. The train coming into Enola, 1984 for this one. Train leaving Enola. A couple of years ago, crossing one of the tributaries into the Susquehanna River around Duncannon. Still had the Pensy position light signals in a couple of years ago. I used to love driving out to Newport. It was a great drive. You park on the side of the road and there's this wonderful sweeping curve. Occasionally I'd climb up the hill, get shots like this with cabooses. This was back when they had 3 tracks there in 1984 or 5 or so. Of course, in later Conrail days, NS days, they lifted one of the tracks. Of course, years and years ago, it was 4 main tracks. One of my favorite Conrail shots of all time at Newport, milepost 131. Under a different lighting condition, a few years later, it looked like this. Whoops, sorry. This is Mifflin Signal Tower. Spent a little time around there as well. There was still an operator here back in my black and white days, but a few years later, of course, I went back. It was all remoted. Tower ripped down. Hawstone, getting closer to Lewistown. Oh, and this is an older shot in Lewistown. And when I lived in Philly in the 80s, of course, I got to know the Philadelphia subdivision of the B&O CSX. So here's the Orange Blossom Special coming down from Jersey, heading toward Florida. This was the swing bridge controlled by the operator there at RG Tower. They would do crew changes here, whatever. The operator, I got to know him fairly well. He was once telling me how he happened to look down the tracks and saw a trespasser walking down the tracks, and he knew this local youth wanted to cross the tracks, and he wanted to discourage that. So in advance, he unlocked the locks and unwedged the wedges and waited till the pedestrian was right in the middle of the bridge, and then he swung it open and left it open for a couple hours because there was no train traffic. Then swung it back eventually, and the gentleman went back from whence he came and was never seen again. This was from the pedestrian bridge that had pretty much been condemned by this point. But I tell you, those chassis painted engines, sure, they stood out on a cloudy day, didn't they? This old time railroading back then. In the background there, that's City of Philadelphia, taken from, I think it was Pine Street in Darby, or might have been in Philadelphia.
What was that little cylindrical structure next to the tracks there you had with the door open?
It was just a little shed, just a little warming shelter, perhaps.
Okay.
Storage, maybe a closet. Looks like there's a room in there.
It's
Pretty
a
fancy.
phone booth, isn't it?
Might have been. Might have been. So this is a train, a trailer train coming out of Boone Tunnel in Darby, Pennsylvania. And that actually is a barber shop on top of the tunnel. And I can imagine what it must have been like getting a shave with the train going by underneath. That might have been a little disconcerting, the rumble and the shake. The track underneath is the Sharon Hill red arrow line. We're basically in Sharon Hill, almost at the end of that line right now for this shot. And it was a rainbow era for CSX back then too. You know, with lots and lots of different colored painted locomotives. This is in Maryland. This is probably near Singerly or Eder, Maryland. With a bridge over the creek. You see how it had been two main tracks back in the day. After the cessation of passenger service in 1958, the B&O ripped out one of the tracks, and they ripped out the bridge as well. One of my favorite spots here at Belvedere. Again, I was trespassing, but nobody cared back then. You'd always see other people back there. Not very many people photographing, but I did. And this was, I think, 1984 or 5 or 6. I'm in mid 80s, let's say. Interesting how you see those cross arms on the pole line. Those are brand new cross arms back as late as the mid 1980s. Another trailer train heading to Philadelphia. Basically the same curve looking the other direction. Orange Blossom Special. This is at Belvedere from the overhead road. Belvedere Road was one of my favorite spots. You know, I would keep going back there. Of course, the dump trucks on the bridge, they went by pretty quickly, and there wasn't very much room to stand up there. So you'd basically be taking your life into your own hands when you're up there, but I never got killed. This is some years later. You see that the foliage is starting to creep in. And this is just a year or two. And now it doesn't have that open view like it used to. Susquehanna even started running trains over the B&O. And I think they were the directed service operator of the service for the D&H. Something to do with that at that point, mid 1980s. But it was kind of neat to see these brand new B40s. And see, I saw that Bill Kalkman was on here before. Bill, if you're still here, you probably recognize this location. Do you, Bill?
Yes, I do. It's East Aiken.
Yep, it sure is. And I know Don has taken many pictures here.
It's just around the corner from the holly tree.
It sure is. And but with a long lens, this is one of my favorite spots on the line. Conrail train. And sure enough, there's East Aiken. And the holly tree would be out of the screen to your left. Same vantage point looking the other way. A meet at East Aiken. The big landmark on the Philadelphia subdivision, as you all know, is the big bridge over the Susquehanna, you know, almost at its widest point. It's fairly high there too. You can see it's two truss spans, the close one here, and then there's Garrett Island in the middle, and then the other one on the other side. So here's an eastbound train fairly early in the morning, and a westbound train. This was taken from Perryville, from down below. D&H train.
This is territory I was qualified over. It's 134 feet to the median water line, and the bridge is 6,700 feet long.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And this with the drone this past November. But back in Conrail days, these shots are taken from the Havre de Grace police shooting range, which you can't really get into now. And then, of course, I spent a lot of time up at Sand Patch. This is the west slope with the Western Maryland bridge in the background. The sole remaining Western Maryland painted unit, second out, not the leader, unfortunately, but oh well. The big Salisbury Viaduct there, that's now a trail. Keystone Viaduct. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this. I know Alex is probably bored to tears because he's been here 1,000 million times. And the summit of the Alleghenies at Sandpatch Tower. Operator leaning out the window, kind of giving a roll by of the train. And then one morning on a frosty morning. Yeah, I got to know the operators there. They responded particularly well to donuts. Then they would set me up with intel for the day. Back years ago, it was fairly easy to get to the west portal of Sandpatch Tunnel. It's hard to, if not impossible, to get to now. East Porter, I think, was a little bit easier. Might still be. This is at Manila. Train grinding up the hill. This is probably, I'm going to say probably December 2000. This shot took probably 88 or so. Baltimore, Chicago train grinding up the hill. Not going really, really fast. The conductor there with his feet up in the window. This ended up becoming the cover shot of the Trains Magazine 1990 calendar. I had sent this in long before I even worked there, but yeah, this proves it. That was the ad from an issue of Trains back in the day.
Odd white color on those trailers, on those tires.
Yeah, it was just some kind of mud. It must have been some kind of gravel. A rainy day there in Baltimore. But yes, you're right. The so-called general store at Mance on the Horseshoe. Lovely day there. Spent a fair amount of time on the Sandpatch grade. And of course, this is several years later. You got all these shiny units and put the really ugly looking one up front. Thank you, CSX. Pouring rain on this day. I don't care. A little nicer day. This is just during the transition. CSX just started painting their units then. It had pretty much renumbered everything by the time I took this picture. And it's just a couple years ago with the drone. Another drone shot with BNSF powered grain train. The fall was a spectacular time of year up there. Yeah, even winter. You used to be able to just, hike down the tracks. Every 50 feet, you'd have a whole nother different view. Nobody cared. Well, now it's all fenced off. Gated, I should say. Wills Creek down below. This is Glencoe. Train coming down the hill. Yeah, this was in November. Not really great weather, but luckily I did see a train. So at the overlook at Foley, this is, I think, one of the first shots I took there. I for some reason, I drove my car up to the top of the hill there, and I just happened to look through the trees and saw, oh, you can see the tracks there. So I kind of bushwhacked to get down here. Of course, now it's a well-worn, very, very acceptable, very well-known location where you get shots like this, which is just stunning. This train was crawling down the hill really, really slow. I guess they didn't want to put any in the drink. And up the hill train. Again, just basically, I'm looking geographically here, not clearly not chronologically in any order. Love the geology there. The Falls Cut Tunnel. And then spend a little time in Chicago. I did some business travel way before I worked for Trains Magazine that brought me out to Chicago relatively frequently. So I'd bring my camera with me and I'd go various places. So some of these pictures are from them. Some are a little bit later, but this is on the IC when it was still 2-track, although that 1 track seems to be out of service. And then a little while later, Hunter Harrison had struck again, and it became a single track railroad. So there's the transition of the IC. Still haven't pulled down that signal. It's clearly not in service, but this is on the former New York Central around Otis. This train peeling off the New York Central going down to Kankakee Beltline. This is on the CNEI / CSX UP heading through Moments, Illinois. And this is where the Conrail crossed on the Kankakee Beltline. So Conrail ran a train a day to the Santa Fe, and from Elkhart to Streeter, and then Santa Fe crew would get on at Streeter. Oftentimes they use Santa Fe Power. And this is up in the tower at Pence. It's a long forgotten memory, huh? Down the road a little bit at Waseca. Crossing the Kankakee River. Crossing the IC at Tolono. And this is on a now abandoned, long gone branch. I forget where it went from and where it went to. I think Manhattan, all the way down to Decatur, I believe, but I might be wrong on that. But they ran a fairly lengthy train, at least once a day. But
I think that'd be the old Wabash line. Yeah.
you may very well be true. The one and only shot I have of the Milwaukee Road, sprint train going through Morton Grove. And this is a few years later around Rochelle, with a meet on the Northwestern, very busy railroad. Northwestern waiting for a BN train. And on the other side of those Sioux Line boxcars is the future home of the no, wait a minute. Is that right? Yeah, the future home of the Rochelle Railroad Park. If I have that. Yes, right. Yeah, that's the correct bearings. This track along the right-hand side there, that's the track that gets into the Del Monte plant.
Yeah, the viewing points on the other.
Yeah.
So that right.
Yeah. And this is the IC. Now you're probably asking, well, how come you don't have any pictures here of the Santa Fe? Well, because we devoted an entire chapter to that. This is where I spent a lot of time, just because they were such a class act. They ran lots of trains, they ran them fast, and it was just a fabulous place to visit. And BNSF continues that tradition today. Superfleet 1992. Ah, man, was this awesome. Scorching the Ballast. Brand new GP50s, probably on their maiden run. And BNSF just does not underpower trains there either today. Just hauling, well, I'll say it, hauling ass. A lot of orange in this. Off to the sunrise.
Nice shot.
Thank you. beautiful morning. Everything was covered with ice. This was my Christmas card one year. As you see, they ran a lot of intermodal and they ran them fast. This is also the era when the ill-fated Southern Pacific Santa Fe merger, they had painted a bunch of engines in anticipation of the merger that didn't happen. Santa Fe actually, yeah, they quickly repainted them back into Santa Fe colors just a couple years ago. But the Superfleet, this first FP45s repainted back into the original colors. Rob McGonigal, who was not yet then the editor of Classic Trains, and I were out for a ride, and we saw this train coming down the hill at Chillicothe, and we basically screamed at each other and yelled and turned around the car and beat it into the crew change point here at Chillicothe. So that was kind of fun.
Is that cobblestone area for passenger pickup or let up? What is that?
It was a passenger station back in the day. Yes,
Okay.
Is that Chillicothe or
it is
a
Chillicothe.
street? Okay.
Maybe this some of these things in regular service. And I happened to be on a tour of GE when they were building some B40s, and so I managed to get a couple of shots. And here's a shot of brand new spanking clean engine, and similar sisters in revenue service on Edelstein Hill and the Houlihan Curve, which used to be a really neat place to go to, but it turns out it was somebody's backyard, and they finally got tired of all the rail fans, so they fenced it off. The top of the hill there at Edelstein. All these searchlight signals there, all long gone. Here's a shot. Oh, here we go. Yeah, another cold, sunny summer, sunny winter day shot with some snow on the ground. Just a fantastic railroad to visit. The bridge at the Spoon River. The old media trestle. I guess BNSF didn't think this was going to last too much longer, so they built a new trestle around it. This one stayed in place. The engineering, just fantastic how they did this. But this is the new media trestle, as you see, very modern. And the pylons are spaced far enough apart to accommodate the old trestle. And then I moved to Wisconsin in 1989. But before I did, I actually, on a business trip, I got this shot of a train crossing into Wisconsin on the Sioux line. Got very lucky to get this picture. This area is all closed off, all fenced off. You can't get this shot anymore, but crossing the St. Croix River out of Minnesota into Wisconsin. Chippewa Falls. I didn't really shoot an awful lot in my early days in Wisconsin. Here's one shot of a train I did catch coming out of Butler Yard, crossing the bridge over the Milwaukee Road in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. The Sioux line, now formerly Milwaukee Road train or line in Oconomowoc. Northwestern on the south side of Milwaukee. On the old Milwaukee Road going into the depot in downtown Milwaukee. Of course, by then it was Sioux line owned by CP. And I didn't shoot an awful lot of Wisconsin Central because I knew there were a lot of other people that were doing it. And I for some reason, I just didn't do it. But this is a train cresting Byron Hill northbound, heading towards Fond du Lac and Green Bay. Back when they ran intermodal on this line. They do today. CN runs an awful lot of intermodal, but nothing local. And this is way up, way near Itasca, near Pokegama, a few miles out of Pokegama on its way towards Stevens Point. little sag there. As you can tell, it's a former Sioux line line. And I always like to get a relatively recent picture in these presentations. So this is a picture I took last week. This is Beverly Lake, which is in Coeur d'Alene, Wisconsin. You see the lime green just foliage just starting to emerge on the hillside in the background. An awful lot of ticks. We ended up with 5 or 6 ticks on each of us. Buddy of mine and I went up there. It's very odd. It's just so beautiful up in northern Wisconsin. Little creek on a fall day. This is Junction City, which is a 4-quadrant crossing. It's all Canadian National now. This train is coming from the left, is Wisconsin Rapids, getting on the main line to the Superior sub. It's heading to Stevens Point. Daily train.
And wise galore.
I'm sorry?
They're wise galore.
They're, well, yeah, not exactly wise, but yeah, you can go in any direction that you need to here. You fully can, which is not something that happens all that often. And there are some legs that are just not used hardly at all, but others do. So kind of a neat spot. This bridge in 2012 replaced the 1899 Chicago Northwestern Bridge. It's modern, but it's built to last. Here's another shot at Oshkosh during the height of the pandemic at Artie and Ed's Drive-In. They wouldn't even let cars park one next to one another. They needed a social distance. They had the cones up to prevent people from getting too close. If this were a normal day, I would be looking right down at my tray of cheeseburger and fries. But no, they didn't do the tray service. The trays that hangs on the side of your car. Again, because of the pandemic, they just brought stuff around in bags. The waitresses were still on roller skates, so that was kind of a good thing. And there's a train going by on its way to Fond du Lac. This is rail fanning from the boat. We had a boat when we had a cottage on Lake Winnebago, so occasionally I'd bring it up here to do some boat photography or photography from the boat. Going down Byron Hill into Fond du Lac. Same train, bumpy road with a telephoto. Brand new units, brand new Tier 4s. You could smell the paint on them. Same location, Byron Hill, on a day with hoarfrost. I meet there with the local tucked into in the distance there, waiting to get back onto the main line. The two main tracks go down to one here. The same situation here, the local just waiting here to work the Quad Graphics plant just up ahead. Crossing the marsh at Theresa. It's kind of spelled like Teresa, but it's pronounced Theresa in Wisconsin. A big grain elevator, not served by rail. Beautiful flocking going on here. I have to explain the story about this. You see, there is a train in this picture. This is a quarry in Waukesha, and my colleague Brian Schmidt was telling me about this shot, and he says, "Well, all you really need to do is you have to climb up a fence, or there's this big chain link fence." I said, "Well, no, I had a ladder, so I brought my ladder one day there, and I was able to get this shot of CN train on the other side of this quarry." At that point is when I renamed the quarry, at least to me and my friends, and to Brian Schmidt, I called it the Schmidt hole. He liked that.
Is this just a stone quarry or is it some special thing?
Yeah, it's a stone used for it's a Payne and Dolan. They do a lot of paving, so they use this as aggregates for their asphalt. So this is up in Manitowoc on the former Northwestern Bridge. The local has a customer north of there. North of that customer, the line has been severed, so they have to slowly creep over the bridge to get to that one customer. Now, this is in Saukville. We have a home in Saukville, lived there for 25, 28 years. And CN just recently gave up their line here. They sold it over to Watco. So it's Wisconsin and Southern now. But yeah, here's a CN train actually working in the rain. This was a harbinger of things to come. CN wanted to abandon north of Saukville, but Wisconsin and Southern said, "No, we'll take that line." But they had to arrange trackage rights to run over CN, and so this was their first train in 2005 on a really snowy day, and now they own the whole thing outright. And this is a night shot I set up. I knew the crews on both of these trains. So the CN local is on the right. They were tied up there for the night. They ran out of time, and I said, "Ron, can you do me a favor and ask the Wisconsin Southern train just to chill out here for a few minutes?" He said, "Oh yeah, sure." So he called up Jamie on the radio and said, "Hey, Mike's out here, wants to take a couple pictures. Can you just pause?" And this was the ambient light night shot that resulted. The Sioux Line 1003 going through Saukville on an excursion train. It was a neat little tradition. They had this on display at Plymouth, Wisconsin overnight, and they had big lights there, so anybody could just take pictures without having to do a flash. And I opted for the long exposure.
What year is this?
This was just a few years ago, probably, I don't know, maybe 2018, 2017, something like that. Wisconsin Southern, of course, they were purchased by Watco, but long before they were, they ran a bunch of passenger trains for their own purpose. They've gotten rid of all this equipment, but they were tied up on the far end of this branch here. Got a nice shot of them going underneath the Union Pacific, former Northwestern Truss Bridge, near I know the name of the town. It's just not coming to me. But oh, you want to see a train on top of that bridge? Okay, there we go. That's Wisconsin and Southern down below.
Is this the Sussex area, maybe?
It's west of there, considerably west. It's way west of Kleiman. It's near Friesland.
Okay.
That's not the town, but it's closer to Friesland than anything else.
Randolph,
I'm sorry.
is it Randolph, Wisconsin or?
Randolph, yeah, Randolph is what I'm thinking of. Thank you for being handy with the map.
I grew up in Wisconsin, so.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. There you go. So this is a big boy. You've seen them, but came barnstorming through Wisconsin. It was just a beautiful sight. And UP does run a bunch of single car, local services where they have local customers that get one car here, one car there. But this was an example of a train in Jefferson, Wisconsin. Yeah, same kind of deal in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Sheboygan is the end of a branch that's UP serves the coal plant up there. And so this shows the very, very end of the line at the coal pile. Lake Michigan in the background there. A tree tunnel that no longer exists. The county highway people thought this was too encroaching on the highway that nobody uses. So they chopped down a lot of these trees for 20 feet in. It's I-43 up above before they raised the speed limit to 70. And Lake Michigan in the background there in Port Washington, Wisconsin. And an Amazon delivery truck. A ballast train with a couple of SD40s and Jeeps. So this is on the Milwaukee subdivision with a foundry that has disappeared completely without a trace. Well, this was in the mid 2000s, maybe 04 or 05. UP ran a road railer train for a bunch of years, from the Twin Cities down into Chicago and I guess on to Fort Wayne. It's a busy train. This is on Jones Island, the Port of Milwaukee. And those things that look like giant boobs, those are silos for salt. Lake boats still tie up in the Port of Milwaukee for the winter. This is kind of a neat shot because the GATX leased locomotive in the foreground, and in the background, Indiana Harbor, which was owned at the time by GATX.
It's a 1,000-footer.
Yep. So most of the time, the UP local would work Jones Island during the day, but there was some track work going on for a week a couple of years ago, so they ran at night. So usually I would end up having lunch with the crew. Well, this night I had dinner with them. But here they are back during their normal daytime routine. And then Canadian Pacific comes down to the Port of Milwaukee as well. So here's CP doing some work. An Amtrak train coming in on a cold morning on CP rail. This is Dan Longley's curve out by Richwood, Wisconsin on a heritage unit. Reeseville, Wisconsin. That is a tank train. Hard to tell with all the heat waves. It was a bitterly cold day and a very long lens. This is Dodge West, the west end of two main tracks. Tunnel City, the only tunnel in existence in Wisconsin. So if you see the train is going over a switch and there's a track going off to our right, that is the Chicago Northwestern, their branch to Wyville and on to Adams. They have trackage rights over the CP. They had their own line through here, their own tunnel, which collapsed in the 1970s. So they came to an arrangement with the Milwaukee Road to share some track and do some trackage rights thing. Camp Douglas with a bluff in the background. This is this winter with a eastbound Empire Builder. And let's take a look at the West. We'll go through here relatively quickly. I got some shots. I was in BC for a conference. Actually, in Alberta, I was in Calgary, but got up to field, got some shots here of the CP. It was just wonderful. We saw a bear. I spent a little time on Altamont Pass and saw this Western Pacific train. Of course, it was UP by then. This is coming out of Niles Canyon, as I recall, near Livermore, Altamont Pass. And this is on the Central Valley. I'm not exactly sure where on the old Santa Fe this was, but again, another very, very fast train. And I spent a lot of time on Cajon Pass as well. So this is at Lugo, east of Cajon Pass. One of the tunnels that's since been daylighted. Really neat place to be if you were a Santa Fe fan. Or even a BNSF fan. This is the train from San Diego. I I had a business trip in San Diego. And as I was leaving the convention center, this train was parked ready to leave. And then I found a hotel in Ontario or whatever and got up on Cajon Pass the next morning. What was the first train I saw but the San Diego to Barstow train? But you can see lots of trains. This is from Hill 582. That's the former RSP, their old Palmdale cutoff, now of course known as the UP Mojave sub up top, and a trailer train going the other way. Oftentimes you see multiple trains. Just gorgeous out there. Who's going to win? Spent a little bit of time in Tehachapi. This has to be around 2000, 2001 or so. A few years later. Just a gorgeous, in the springtime when everything is green, it's just beautiful up there. And then one morning, one day in 2014, I spent a day on the UP in Afton Canyon and east of there. So here we are crossing the Mojave River. Saw 7 trains that day. It was fantastic. It's usually not that busy. And this is approaching the top of Sema Hill, east of Kelso. Big train, just crawling up the hill, but you made it. I think maybe the reason why they were running a lot of trains that day is because the very next day, that big boy, that 4014, was being dragged across the country. And that was set to go the next day. So I think they were getting rid of stuff as they could. This is at Goff's on the old Santa Fe. And boy, do they run trains fast out there, and a lot of them. At Potomac, crossing the border out of Arizona into California. Kingman Canyon is one of my favorite places.
Nice shot.
Thank you. 2 trains here in this shot at Kingman. With the drone, you can do some really fantastic things. This is closer to Valentine. This is the Truxton flyover. You might have read about this. BNSF needs to cross trains over from one line to another on account of grades. They're not necessarily next to one another for many of the miles. They built steeper downgrade lines and longer, lesser grade, upper grade lines for predominantly for traffic going in the right direction. But it was always a pain to cross trains over from one track to the other. Well, they solved that by building this gigantic flyover here at Truxton. So it was, a friend of mine works for BNSF, and he was telling me how many train hour delays were saved just by building this. It cost them many millions of dollars to do it, but for a railroad, they're looking at the end game here. This is around Crookton. Humphreys Peak in the background. It's off in the distance is Flagstaff. So I stayed in Winslow one night, and the next morning I got up very early to catch trains here in this fresh snow at Winona at milepost 329. Beautiful place.
Is that
sunny day.
Winona of the song Route 66?
That is exactly Winona. Don't forget Winona. And I spent a little time around the Powder River Basin as well. So this is on BN's line that basically goes through Newcastle. It is not the Oran sub, but their line up to Alliance, between Alliance and Gillette. So a few trains there, a lot of coal traffic on this line. SD40s galore back in the day. This had to have been 1988 or so. And this is the orange sub itself. Late 1990s. This is probably 2017. The brand new SD70, brand new. A few years ago. A little older, from the 90s. I got into one of the coal mines. This is Eagle Butte. Oklahoma. Spent a little time there. Short time, but this is one of the former one of the bottlenecks on the former Santa Fe. It's single main track. They, as you can see in the background there, they graded for another track. Never completed the project though. Just love the orange earth up there, the red dirt. It really complements the paint scheme. And we'll wrap up things here with a short little look at some railroading along the Mississippi River, which I've been doing, shooting this since like, well, 30 years on and off. We recently bought a house here as well. This is Bellevue, Iowa on the Sioux Line side. This was this past October at Reno. Keith Creel, the CEO of Canadian Pacific, was on the train by this point. They're heading to Kansas City. This is the swing bridge over the Mississippi River at La Crescent, Wisconsin, or Minnesota, I should say. And the other end of there, this is the lift bridge over the Black River, which there's a confluence right below this between the Black River and the Mississippi. Those 5 tugboats are tied up for the winter. They're owned by Riverview Tug Service of Bellevue, Iowa. And if you go to riverviewboatstore.com and you look at their fleet, many of the photos were taken by moi. Interesting. But yeah, they're all tied up for the winter. As you see, just a skim of ice is starting to form on the river there. Dakota, Minnesota, along the Mississippi River. And this is near Donauer. This is near Whitman. Lock and Dam number 5 in the background there. And on the BN side, this is just out of Savannah, Illinois.
Mississippi Palisades,
Correct.
camp there.
Mm-hmm. This is a CN train crossing the BNSF at into East Dubuque, going into a hill and a long tunnel that's very curved. That was the original rail line through there. And it wasn't until the 1870s, early 1870s. No, it was later than that, 1880s, when predecessor to the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy built through there. And they had to have a joint arrangement with a track south of here between Dubuque, East Dubuque, and Galena. So there's always all kinds of tributaries that spill into the Mississippi, and here's one of them. One of which is the Wisconsin River. So this is BNSF's hottest intermodal train on the division, Chicago to St. Paul, crossing the confluent, the mouth of the Wisconsin River. Took earlier this month. Lynxville with the drone. This is kind of a marshy area around Bryce Prairie As you can see, there's basically a causeway through there. And this is Trempealeau, Wisconsin. At Lock 6 with a BNSF train going by. I have several shots of Trempealeau, and in fact, when we're done here, I've got a short multimedia presentation for those who care to stick around for it. These are around Trempealeau here. This is where our other house is. Fog burning off. Closer by Fountain City. Alma, Wisconsin, with the Lackawanna Heritage Unit. And this is the Chippewa River where it dumps into the Mississippi. Chippewa River brought in a lot of sand. This is kind of at a low water time, so you can see a lot of the sand that it's brought down. It was a faster flowing river than the Mississippi, which kind of ended up making its own natural dam. It created that impoundment, which is Lake Pepin in the background on the Mississippi River. But just phenomenal scenery out here. And we're just about done. We are done with this portion of the presentation.
I cover the water run, watching the sea. I cover the water run. I could see coming in to the harbor. I see the people getting on board. I could not see the one I love. Got on board. I covered the waterfront, and after a while, all the ships left the harbor, headed for the next destination. I cover the waterfront. I waited all night long in the pouring rain. I did too, searching for my baby. I was drinking black coffee from a paper cup. How much? And smoking 40 cigarettes. And when the sun in the sky, where you put it, came up early in the morning, I said, Lord, 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 bring my baby back. Bring my baby back. I'm still covered the waterfront. I cover the waterfront, watching for my baby. saw a ship coming down the ocean out of the fog, rolling so slow. Must be my baby coming down. I cover the waterfront. And I see my baby coming down gangway. I said from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Lord, for bringing my baby back home to me. I've been so lonely, sitting in my room by my telephone. Said, baby, welcome back home. Welcome back home. Lord, 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 Lord. After a while, the ship pulled in to the harbor. And she run to my arms. The Johnny, I've been waiting so long to come down. I know you'll be waiting for me, covering this old waterfront, covering the waterfront for me.
Oh, very nice,
Very-
Mike.
Yes.
Nice.
Thank you.
Great program.
Yeah,
Thank you.
wow. Thank you, Mike. Just some outstanding photography. Really neat.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike,